In order to configure the external authentication with Radius, we will have to start with defining an object on the FMC. We will populate it with the settings. We will go over this stuff in just a second, but remember that you will also have to configure your Radius server. Now, just to show you this quickly in the documentation, we will go to Security, then Firepower Management Center over here. And I'm gonna take a look at configuration guides. We will look for 6.2.2 because this is the version that we use in our racks. And we will go to, is this going to be user account or Firepower System Management? Firepower System User Management is the doc I want to show you. And we will be specifically looking at this section, Radius Authentication. So this is where you can find it in the documentation. Now, in particular, what we will have to do as we build our object, so this is something that you will access from system users and then external authentication, we will have to specify the server settings, IP address, timeouts, and so on. We will have to configure the permissions. There is also going to be some place for optional configuration, like maybe restrict access to the shell, add some custom attributes. Remember, as I mentioned previously, you can push permissions using custom attributes. This is also an option for Radius. And just to show you this, in the doc CD, if we scroll down to the custom Radius attributes, there should be a section for this feature. It's going to be this one. Notice what it says. It says that the Radius server attributes are defined in the dictionary file, which is located in this folder, etc/Radius client. I can actually quickly show you this. We will go to the FMC. I'm gonna say, go to this folder. We will take a look at all of the files. Radius conf, this is what's gonna be populated by FMC's external authentication object. But we can take a look at the dictionary. So it contains, we scroll up to the top, it is going to tell us what attributes it supports. This is the Livingstone implementation of Radius. We've got a bunch of attributes that are defined in the dictionary. So this is what FMC's Radius understands by default. All those different attributes with the actual value, and then also definition for those attributes with possible values for at least some of them. Like login service, it says you've got those options. So all this stuff is supported by default. Now, if you were to use a different attribute, by the way, I want to show you one of these 25. 25 is the class attribute. So this is what I will be using throughout this session, as part of this session, to show you the sample implementation. But if this is going to be something else that not is part of that list, you will have to add it as a custom attribute. And I'm going to show you how to do this when we get to the configuration. Right, so to finish the configuration, you will have to save and apply the changes, otherwise they won't take effect. So we can save, but if you don't apply, nothing's gonna change, nothing's gonna happen. Right, and what we will do here is that I'm gonna use FMC, and I will want to communicate FMC with ICE1, which is over here. But technically speaking, the ICE is also reachable via my management cloud. And this is based on the default security rack setup here at INE. So you don't have to make any changes to the base configuration for the rack to communicate FMC with ICE1. We will technically bypass all the devices shown in this network because we will communicate directly through a default gateway. But this is fine. We don't have any firewall in between these two. We just want to have radius connectivity between FMC and ICE, and this is gonna happen again by default on our racks. Okay, I'm gonna start this configuration on the Identity Services engine. Okay, let me quickly log in. It's gonna be admin default 1A, I believe is the password. And maybe in the meantime, on the FMC itself, what we will have to do, we will have to go to System and then Users over here. Right, and from here, we see that by default there is the single admin account, which is given the administrator role. It's authenticated internally, meaning that this account is stored on the FMC itself. If you take a look at the user roles, we have an entry for administrator. If I were to show you that, we see that every single option menu-based permission is checked. So this account has access to all GUI options on the FMC. Okay, what do we have to do on the Identity Services engine? Well, first and foremost, I will want to add a network device group because I'm gonna use this as a condition to catch authentication attempts to my FMC. So I'm gonna say that for the device types, we will not be adding any type of custom group. I'm gonna use the default all device types. I will just add an entry here. I'm gonna call it FMCs, or firewalls would be another good name for this one. Okay, in the next step, we will add our device. I'm gonna add FMC as a client, as a radius client. So I'm gonna say add under network devices. I'm gonna call it FMC1. It uses 172.16.15.100. Double check this, right? It's the right IP address. And for authentication, we will use Cisco as a passport. This is for radius. And then the device type is gonna be my FMCs. Okay, so this is the config I wanna use for FMC1 as a client. Now, the other thing that we will have to do is that we will have to add some user accounts to show you that the communication, the access is actually different. I'm gonna add a single group, user group, to easily distinguish between different authentication attempts, but this time not for the devices, this time for the users. I'm gonna say user identity groups, add a new one, and I'm gonna call it FMC admins, uppercase. And one group is gonna be fine, because I'm gonna say that if someone is not part of this group, it's gonna get less permissions than if it was part of that group. Okay, now 2 accounts to show you differentiated access. Let's add an entry for FMC admin, and this guy is gonna have full access to the GUI. Let's give it a password, Cisco123 with C uppercase, and make this guy part of FMC admins. Okay, the password. Okay, right. I'm gonna delete enable. I want to have a match over here. Now submit. Okay. Right now, another account I'm gonna add. I'm gonna call this guy analyst. Let's say analyst admin, or just let's call it access admin. I believe that there is actually a user role that we will be able to use for this one. Access admin. I'm gonna use the same password over here, and then the group, I won't choose any of these. I'm going to leave this guy as unassigned. We take a look at that over here. We see that the identity group for access admin is blank, which means that this user is not part of any group. And we will leverage this information as we build our policy. We take a look at authentication policy. We don't really have to make any changes here. We will have a match in the default rule, which is a catch-all for authentication. And as a result of that, we will authenticate users using the all user identity sequence stores, which is the all user ID stores identity sequence, I should say, which is basically a combination of all databases available on ICE, including the internal database that we've just populated over here. Okay, we will still need a bunch of policy elements. Oh, actually just one for authorization. I'm gonna build an authorization profile where I will say that this is gonna be pushed for anyone authenticated who I wanna make part of the FMC admins group. And I'm gonna call it, let's think what's gonna be a good name for this one. Because I wanna, in this case, I will also match the class attribute with the name of the profile just to make it clear of what is what. I'm gonna call it full access FMC. And we will also copy this. It's gonna be, of course, access accept type of the radius response. And I'm gonna use the ASA VPN option, which is basically the class attribute, number 25. I wanna put this number at this value over here. So this is the attribute, this is the value. I can submit. We've got the profile, we will then push to the authenticated admins. Right, I believe that to finish this, the only thing that we are missing now is gonna be 2 authorization rules. And I'm gonna start adding a rule, let's say over here, below Cisco IP phones. I'm gonna call it full access to FMC -admins. This is gonna be my group, user group. So as long as user is part of FMC admins and it authenticates to the FMC client, choose the device type from the device dictionary, must match my FMC. So if these two are met, I'm gonna push my custom authorization profile, which is gonna return the class attribute set to full access FMC. And the reason that I wanna do this here is that remember that there are actually 3 methods as how permissions can be enforced. And I wanna show you all of them. So we will take a look at, we will see how to enforce access using the AV-per, which is what we do over here. We will take a look at how to do this with the aid of a user list. In our case, the list is going to have just 1 entry. And this is what we will configure on the FMC, well, simply in one of the text boxes. And method number 3 is going to be the default role, default permission, which is also something that I will configure on the FMC. Now, technically, the AV value, I will also put it on the FMC, but it's just the easier way of grouping admins than specifying account names one by one as a list. That's why I also want to show you this method. Right, I'm gonna copy this rule and we will put it under the admin role. And this is gonna be partial access to FMC. Okay, I'm gonna remove the group. We will leave the device type because this is for login attempts to the FMC, not any other type of device. And we will save this policy. Oh, one more thing I have to do. It says please add at least one identity group. This is what I want to get rid of. I don't really want to add anything, right? Just remove this. And I also want to change permission because I want to use the default permit access, which is just an authentication, okay. And we may actually want to, let me show you this. Let me show you permit access, just to make it clear. This is a blank access accept versus full access is our class attribute, our group. Okay, is it gonna take this syntax now, or do I have to edit this? Let's just say any. That's what it is looking for. So for any other group than admins, including no group, we're gonna have a match in the second rule over here. Right, I'm gonna save. And we will now take a look at that on the FMC. So from the system users, we have to go to external authentication. This is where we will build our object. I'm gonna add a new one. Okay, we will change the method to radius. We will change the database to radius. This is gonna be our ICE1 profile, which is 172.16.3.100. We will use the default port 1812. And this is the permission section. Now to show you this in action, what we will do is that for the administrators, I'm gonna say that the class must equal to, and what was the name I used for the attribute? It was the same as the permission, full access FMC. Like this. So you put the attribute, you put the value. Now for our access admin user role, I'm gonna specify the user name, access admin. This is what we put added as a user to the internal database. Okay, and we will also configure the default, select the default user role. I'm gonna say that this is gonna be security analyst read only. This one is gonna have the least number of permissions. And now we will save this. Okay, I didn't put a password, which is Cisco. It must match my password on ICE. Let's try to save once again. And before we will take a look at this in action, I want to guys quickly show you how to, maybe let's just make sure it is enabled. Yeah, let's edit it. Okay, let's just stay on page save. So I enabled, I saved. We go, re-edit it. And I want to show you how to test it without having to change the accounts, without having to log out and then log back in with a different name. This is how we will start the tests. I'm gonna authenticate this access admin. This is what I tell it. Password is this, and I want to test. Okay, so my expectation here is that we will have a successful authentication. We will see a successful authentication. This is how we can see the results. And it says authentication is okay. This is the username. Notice what it is showing us here. It says member user match found. It is talking about the permissions. Permissions or simply our user roles. which are somewhere here above this output, it means that we have a match with one of those roles. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you which of them, but we know that our user is going to be associated with one of those permissions. Okay, now if I were to authenticate, let's say as FMC admin was the other account, FMC admin, we will test, and we should see a similar output here. Now notice that in this case it also shows us the attribute value pushed by the radius server. Again, we have a match with one of the permissions. It says this, but it doesn't tell you which user role as a match. Now we can figure that out just looking at those values. We know that class full access is for admin versus access admin user is access admin. So we can use this method. But in my opinion, it would be really nice if it told you what role you match. Okay, maybe let's try to authenticate as just admin. Not admin. Let's just try to authenticate as, let's say, Cisco 123. So in this case, I think that authentication is going to fail because we don't have this account on radius. Authentication failed. Okay, let's just take a look at one more thing here. I'm going to remove access admin from the permission, and we will authenticate once again. What's going to be the difference now? So we should see that authentication is going to be successful, but since we will not match any of the permissions, it just says that authentication is okay. It doesn't say that we have a member match. Okay, but I'm gonna put it back here. Access admin, we will save this. And this time I'm also gonna apply this configuration. I'm gonna make it active on the FMC. So I have to save, and I have to save and apply. Now it is gonna take effect. And we will now test this. I'm going to log out from the admin account. You see I have access to all FMC features. We will log out and authenticate as FMC admin. So this guy has the same user role as the default admin account. We shouldn't see any difference. I'm going to log in. And by the way, if you take a look at the radius, the ICE logs for radius, you should see those authentication attempts as a success. Okay, go back to the FMC. We see we still have those different menu options. We go system users. What is going to change now in this case is that it automatically added a user to the users tab. It's FMC admin. It says authentication method was external, but notice what it is also telling us. It says that the role assigned to this account is administrator. So the logic is that when you authenticate for the first time using the external database, FMC adds an account, it binds it to the associated with the users tab, which is more of like the local database. And this is just to cache those user accounts to speed up the subsequent authentications. So it added an entry to the local database, but if we were to change the role, modify those settings, this was another authentication, it would automatically update this information here in this more of like local database. Okay, so this guy has full access. We log out and we come back as access admin. Cisco 1, 2, 3. Okay, we see a difference. We have less options in the menu. The system doesn't give me access to the users section. I cannot modify external authentication. Database settings, we will have to log out and then log in, let's say, as admin. Now let's also try to disconnect from the FMC, from the CLI, and authenticate as access admin. What is gonna be the end result of that? So we should see that we won't be able to access the CLI of FMC because we lack appropriate permissions. Cisco 1, 2, 3. I'm pretty sure I put the right password. It says authentication failed. Right, so what we will change now is that we will go to the database settings for our ICE1, and we will quickly see the admin, access admin was authenticated, was assigned the access admin role. We will go back to external authentication, and from here for ICE1, we will quickly add some additional permissions for our access admin. I'm gonna say that this guy should be also given the shell access. We will now save this, and with this in place, now I will also have to apply those changes. So save and apply. We should be able to get to the shell. Access admin. Let's do it once again. Cisco 1, 2, 3. Access admin. Still says authentication failed. Let's go back to the FMC. Let me recheck the settings here. Oh, I think I know what's the problem. Access admin. I spelled it right. So I'm gonna click cancel. I'm gonna change this option. Let's globally enable shell authentication for ICE1. And let's push this change. Okay, we give it another attempt. So from scratch, access admin. Cisco 1, 2, 3. And we just connected to the shell. So we had to enable shell authentication globally for this authentication object, and we had to add this user to the shell filter, shell access filter list. If you want to add more accounts, just separate them with commas. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you is what is going to happen if we remove the access admin user from the access admin permission. Remember, we still have this default user role set to security analyst with read-only access. Let's take a look at this in action as well. This is going to cover all combinations for that type of a setup. I'm going to apply those changes, and we will quickly log out of the FMC and log back in as access admin. So we should see that this time we see even less permissions than if this was the access admin type of user role. We can only take a look at analysis and also the health statistics. No configuration access is possible in this case.